Right now, I've got a very important story to blow another hole in the pharmaceutical industrial complex as they deserve to be. I'll leave it at that. But I'm joined in studio here in Minneapolis by a sweet family, the Nagels. And, in fact, Cheryl Nagel, the mom here, is with me. And in 1990, I'm just going to recap this real quick for my audience. You and your husband adopted a little baby girl from Romania. This was at the fall of the Soviet Union, the Eastern Europe. It was starting to break apart. And there was a big pull or call, we have all of these babies, they need homes, come adopt them. And so you went there, you found a beautiful little girl, but in order to bring her back into the U.S., what was the United States requiring at that time?
At that time, they were requiring us to have an HIV test that would prove that she was negative in order to bring her back in. Right.
And at that time of the 1990 or so, there was a great fear that HIV was going to wipe out, the whole world almost. It was everybody was going to get it. And so the U.S. government was playing right along into that and saying, okay, you want to bring the kids in, they have to have an HIV test. So you tested little Lindsay, right?
Right. We had her tested at the Poly Teton Clinic.
Okay. And everything was fine, right?
Right.
Okay. So you got your approval. You brought her into the States. Then what happened next?
Our doctor here in Minneapolis recommended that we have a series of tests that they do on internationally adopted children. And so I agreed, that would be good. And so he called us a few days after we had all those tests done, and he said, you need to come into my office. So we went into his office, and he said, I'm afraid I have really bad news. Your baby tests positive for the HIV virus, and guess what? She's going to be dead within 2 years.
Now, was there any evidence of illness at this point, or does this child look pretty healthy?
No. There was no evidence of any illness whatsoever.
So based on what we now know is what we call a nonspecific antibody test of some type, that the inserts themselves admit that they can't detect the absence or presence of HIV, nor be used to diagnose AIDS, this doctor, like so many in America at that point, said, basically, we think there's a positive test here, so your baby's going to die. There's nothing we can do. Or was there something they said they could do?
There's nothing that we could do except we could give her the miracle drug AZT.
Right.
And he referred us to a specialist at the Children's Hospital in Minneapolis.
So they started giving this, syrup on a daily basis, an AZT syrup?
Right. 4 times a day, every 6 hours, we were to give Lindsay this syrup. It was called Retrovir, to syrup for kids.
Mm-hmm. And were there any side effects of this that you could see? Did you know, or did you just think that if she's not doing well, it's probably because she's got this HIV thing?
Because she wasn't, or doctor so-called said she was not thriving. They upped her dose every now and then, and supposedly then she'd gain a little weight. But she was on the drug for almost 2 years, and she started flatlining. In other words, her body was growing, but she was not gaining weight. And she wasn't eating like my niece and my nephews, so I thought maybe it was the HIV. So, of course, I talked to the doctor, and she said, oh, yes, it is the HIV. It makes people so their bodies just quit growing.
Did they ever tell you that AZT was a failed chemotherapeutic drug? In other words, it was too toxic to give to cancer patients?
No. We had to discover that on our own.
Yeah, so the docs didn't even tell you that, and giving a helpless little baby that seemed healthy as can be, except for a negative test in Romania, a positive test here in the U.S., and perhaps that same test, as we're going to learn when we come back from this break, may not have been positive in other countries around the world. This is the lack of science, the lunacy of the HIV mythology. It's another cult of modern medicine, and it has to be broken so that no other children are harmed in the way that Lindsay was. But again, there may be good news here. We're going to hear about that when we come back on the Robert Scott Bell Radio Show, where we rock the health world for your liberty and your healing freedom. And we're talking right now with Cheryl Nagel. She, again, up in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I've got the family in studio. We're talking about the HIV issue, which I've covered for years in the media here while no one's listening, because they don't want to hear the truth and the facts, simply because it's just too much to bear, that the worship of the pharmaceutical industrial complex and allopathic medicine is something they don't want to lose. But they've already lost it. It's already over. It's already over. Do you understand that you cannot bring a nation back to health by pumping it full of more drugs and vaccines? There is no drug deficiency disease. There's no vaccine deficiency disease. The same thing that AIDS is not a deficiency of AZT or any of the other drugs that they've modified since that time. And Cheryl, in the case of your daughter, like I said, 2 years on the AZT, she stopped growing. The docs insisted that it was AIDS, that it was going to kill her. You got to keep drugging her. What happened?
Towards the end of her 2-year time, AZT. She experienced such severe leg cramps in the middle of the night that we were running in to give her Tylenol and massage her legs and calm her down 2 or 3 times every single night. And we were getting really, really exhausted. And I could call the doctor, and she said, well, it's just all part of HIV. That's what HIV does. And so my dad read an article in the National Review written by Tom Bethel about Peter Duesbergs, a doctor in California. He's not a medical doctor, but he is a doctor of science. And he wrote an article, and he said in the article that, first of all, AZT is terrible. It kills you, first of all. And the second thing that he said was that HIV may not even cause AIDS. And so we wrote to Peter Duesbergs at that very, not that very same time, but we kind of molded around in our minds, because I thought my dad was just trying, this was just absurd. Everybody knows HIV causes AIDS. But the further on we got with this, we read stories about Elizabeth Glaser, and she lost her daughter, and then she lost her own life. And we're going, you know what, I bet you there's something to this, that AZT is really the culprit here. So we wrote to Peter Duesbergs, and he wrote back to us 10 days later and sent us a full package of information. And he said, take your daughter off the drugs immediately or it'll kill her, just like Kimberly Bagalis, who was in the news at that time.
And Ryan White.
Mm-hmm. And Ryan White. And so we took Lindsay off the AZT that very day. We did not give her another dose. And within a few days, all the leg cramps ceased. And she started drinking milk, which she had stopped drinking altogether. And she started eating better. And within a month, she gained about 26% of her body weight.
In a month, she started gaining.
Mm-hmm.
How fast kids can detoxify if you pull the stuff out of their system.
And we took her to a holistic doctor here in the Twin Cities who gave her proper, just ordinary vitamins, but mega doses for a couple of weeks, and then we tapered off to a regular, scheme.
So you saw some improvement very rapidly here.
Very rapidly.
I'm sure that you've gotten hammered at the time and by the medical community for stopping the drugs. They probably said you're going to kill your daughter, as if she wasn't going to die, according to them already.
The doctor that we were then seeing at the university called our holistic doctor, and she was very upset because, and the reason she knew about the holistic doctor is because we asked Dr. Hostetter at the U to forward all of Lindy's records to the holistic doctor, just so she could see what her blood work has been, what her weight was. And so it was the New Year's Eve day of 1992, we got a call from her holistic doctor, and she said, you really better get some legal assistance here, because your doctor just called me from the U, and she said, there are homes who would be happy to take care of Lindsay and give her her drugs and make her sick again if you're going to be improper parent. So in other words, she was threatening to have her removed from her home and put in foster care.
Big pharma owning big government, ready to take away children who are not being drugged, according to the mythology. There's more to this story. When we come back, we're going to hear, does it have a happy ending? This is an interesting thing. This is an understatement. This is where you'll get facts and truth and healing that you'll get nowhere else in the mainstream media. You're listening to the Robert Scott Bell Radio Show. Right now, we're continuing with the story of little Lindsey Nagel and the fact she was attacked by AZT with an HIV diagnosis, not out in... well, it's a positive test, I should say. Out of Romania, it wasn't, and here in America it was. Then they went after her with AZT. This girl was definitely dying. They said it was AIDS. Mom, Cheryl here, you said, no, it looks like it's the drug. Peter Duesbergs has written a paper. He says it's not HIV. Get her off the drugs. You pull her off. She starts improving. The medical community now is going, even the ones helping you, going, look out, they're going to come after her. They're going to take her because they want her on those drugs. What happens next?
The next thing we did was the day after New Year's Day, which would be January 2nd, 93, I called an attorney who was a family friend, and he said, if she were my daughter, I would take her to the Mayo Clinic and get help down there. Just set her on the floor and say, what would you have me do? So we took her to the Mayo Clinic, or we called the Mayo Clinic, actually, and we got a doctor there who said, I'll care for your daughter. Her name's Dr. Nancy Henry. And she said, I will look at her, and I will not make you give her AZT.